The Sweet Danny J Show is sponsored by Joe A. Weeks, PC. Also sponsored in part by the Shining Light Recovery Home for Women.
It's the Sweet Danny J Show. Hello, my lovies. It's the Sweet Danny J Show. Good day, my lovies.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I am your sweet Danny J, and we are here today. We're going to talk about recovery while in recovery. So what we're basically going to talk about today is about addiction. Now, everyone sensationalizes some form of addiction. I'm addicted to loving you. I'm addicted to sex, drugs, and alcohol. But what happens when that addiction takes the most of you, takes away from who you are, changes who you are to the other people, changes your relationships, and everything from the high goes to low, and the reality starts to set in. Well, our guests today have gone through that process. The drugs and alcohol have taken them to the highs, and they've experienced the lows. And then they want to talk about rising back up again into recovery. And you never completely recover from your addiction. You're always in recovery. Every last one of us are always in recovery from whatever we're doing, whatever goes on. We're always going to remain in recovery. So life is a continuous battle. So help me today as we celebrate recovery while in recovery. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Joe Weeks.
And I'm Joya Davis.
Let's face it, no one goes to an attorney because things are going great. You come to us because you need help.
You need someone who will listen, someone who will understand.
Whether you've been injured in a car wreck or arrested for DUI.
Facing a divorce or considering adoption.
Here at the law offices of Joe Weeks and Joya Davis, we feel it's important to meet with you to help you find a solution.
To put your mind at ease.
We're here for you. Call us at 404-296-1444.
We'd love to hear from you.
Good day, my lovies.
And welcome back. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Be sure to like us on Facebook and Twitter and follow us on Instagram. I am your sweet Danny J. And right now we're sitting with my first guest, Miss Lindsay. Now, Miss Lindsay, you are currently a manager at a predominant chain. Mm-hmm. And you've been a manager for how long?
About 3 years now.
And how are you liking it?
I like it. I like being a productive member of society in general. So
now, let's go ahead and delve into it. You are a recovering addict.
Yes.
Now, what was or were your drugs of choice? And did you do drugs and alcohol, or?
It was mainly heroin and some crack cocaine. Yeah, I'm a recovering heroin and crack cocaine addict.
Wow. So did you do alcohol at all, or?
There was a period I was in the military for a few years, and there's one thing I learned while I was there. It was how to drink. So yes, I did my fair share of drinking in the military.
Okay. Now, one of the things that you grew up in a household. Now, when we first met mm-hmm. and we talked, you told me that you grew up in the unpredictable household. Like your father was a counselor or a psychiatrist?
My father's a physician, and his specialty is addiction medicine.
And your mom is a nurse?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me how, because everyone thinks of you have to come from a certain economic background
Correct.
to become addicted to something. You're either very, very rich or very, very poor, but no one considers the people right there in the center.
Sure.
Can you tell us how you got started?
I believe that I was born with the disease of addiction, and it manifested itself around age 13, 14. The first time I was offered ecstasy in high school.
So now, ecstasy, that is the actual pill, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, how did it make you feel when you were offered this pill and your dad, mm-hmm.
Focused
on all the negativities from it? How did it make you feel when he...
Well, I always felt, for as long as I can remember, I felt like I never fit in. I felt that uncomfortableness. And I've heard a lot of addicts and alcoholics mention the same thing, that feeling of uneasiness, never feeling comfortable in your own skin. And so here I was in high school, just at the height of my awkwardness, you know, and this person offered me a pill, right? It wasn't a scary syringe, it was a little white pill, and it was called ecstasy, and they told me it would make me feel better and different and great. And I mean, I didn't hesitate, you know?
Did it?
I just did not hesitate. I didn't. I was just
Did
like,
you feel better and great?
yes, you know, for a while, the drugs absolutely did that for me, so.
Okay, so how did you evolve from ecstasy to, well, let me ask you this. How often did you experience it or partake of it?
Well, it was a gradual thing, and, you know, I don't think you go into, you know, homelessness and addiction overnight, but you know, it started out as an every weekend thing, you know, ecstasy and the club drugs at the time, and then you know, maybe some on Wednesdays, and until it did get pretty serious, and I decided the school was no longer a priority, and I dropped out.
Okay, and so now you went from ecstasy to heroin, correct?
There was a lot of drugs in between, you know. There was pain pills, a lot of pain pills and Xanax and that kind of thing, and like I said, the club drugs, ketamine and acid and mescaline, you know, all that.
You're about to start naming stuff I have no
Yeah.
So, but all of it sounds very, 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 like you can get right into it.
Yeah.
They sound like really hard drugs.
Right.
The one that we all know is the oxycodone. That's the pain. That's the pain drug that they sell on the streets as much. Now tell me this, when you started to partake of it and you decided that school was no longer a priority, what was your life like? What did you start doing, and when did your family start to notice the change within you?
I don't know. They noticed I became more withdrawn, and you know, there was a divorce at some point. My parents did separate, and so I was living with my mom, and she was in active alcoholism. So there wasn't a lot of focus on me, period, at that time. You know, we were really kind of dealing with my mom and her issues. So it gave me, it made it easier for me to sneak away and do what I wanted to do. You know, so but yeah, so.
Okay, well, when we return, we're going to talk more about life as an addict and life in recovery when your sweet Danny J returns.
I've been a drug addict my entire life. I guess I started using when I was about 12 or 13. It was hell. It really was. I was hustling for money, I was homeless, and that lifestyle, the people who live it, we have a very short shelf life. We either end up dead or in long-term prison. What is different about this treatment center is Teresa Bestwick.
Hello, my name is Teresa Bestwick, and I am the founder of Shining Lighthouse for Women, located right here in Henry County. We are a long-term residential program that treats women that are drug and alcohol addicted. Here at Shining Light Ministries, we provide 22 classes a month for all women who've lost their way. We are in need of more beds here at Shining Light Ministries. So our board of directors put a building campaign fund together to raise $80,000. This will give us a 20-bed add-on, a full kitchen, industrial laundry room, more classrooms to help our women fight the disease of addiction and to be reunited with their families and loved ones.
I love my new life.
Help save a life today by visiting our website at shininglighthouse.com.
Good day, my loves. And welcome back to your sweet Danny J. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. Now, I'm speaking with Miss Lindsay, who is a recovering addict. Did I say that correctly? Okay.
Yes.
Now, when we took our break, you were speaking to us about how school had become not a priority.
Correct.
Now, what was life like when you got rid of school, and let's move a little forward. What were some of the things that you experienced and your decline while on addiction leading up to you saying, I don't want to do this anymore?
Right. Well, I mean, there was a large gap in between then and me getting sober, because initially I was never really addicted to a drug per se, but I was addicted to feeling differently. I didn't like myself and I didn't like the way I felt. So anything that could change that, I was for. But slowly, not even that slowly, but that began to become my main focus, was getting high. You know what I mean? And that's what I was addicted to for a while. And I was kind of holding down little jobs here and there, anything I do to support my habit. And at one point I did join the military. My parents suggested it, and they thought it would cure me, or my mother did. My dad didn't really. Yeah, he thought I was.
Moms are always looking for cures that way, don't they?
Yes.
That's good.
And that's actually where I was introduced to heroin. So. Yeah, and I don't blame the military. I have to say that. We attract what we are, and that's what I did. I went onto a base of thousands and thousands of hardworking, honest men and women, and I found my crowd. Within a week or two, I found the rebels and the rejects and the crowd I wanted to be a part of.
You found them. It's amazing how we find each other when we're not looking for it, right?
Yes, exactly. So yeah, that's where I was introduced to heroin, and it was in that moment I was like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for my whole life. That it was that powerful.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So how far down did you did say that you experienced prostitution and homelessness while you were addicted. Now, at what point, what was the day or time where you said, you know what, I need to change. This is it. I've hit as far down as I want to go.
Well, I do. I never tell my story and not mention that, the homelessness and the prostitution. It's very important for me to mention that because it was that bad for me, and I want that to be the purpose of my story, is that it was bad for me, and if I can do it, anyone can do it. But I was having a lot of seizures. I was mixing the Xanax and the heroin, and I was homeless. I was getting, it was nothing to get beaten up and to not have a place to sleep, and that was pretty common. I will say though, I was never really ready to go to treatment. I was never really ready to accept help, because if I had waited until I was ready, I'd be dead right now. Heroin was my best friend. It was my boyfriend. It was my family. It was all I needed to survive, and to comprehend living without it for the rest of my life. I was never ready to pursue that. And I remember that day when I reached out and I asked for help. I had just gotten out of the hospital. It was winter in Ohio, where I'm from, and it was snowing, and they'd had to cut my jeans off when I got to the hospital, because I'd been walking the streets in the snow. My jeans were cold and they were wet and stuck to my body, and it was almost like God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. I remember reaching out and picking up the phone and calling my dad, and I wasn't ready to give up the drugs forever. I was ready to take a break and regroup and lower my tolerance a little bit so I could have more energy to go back out in the streets with. And lo and behold, it's been 3 years now.
So when you went looking for help, you weren't looking for complete help. You were just looking to get me set up.
Correct. And that's important. I like to reiterate that, because if I'd waited until I was ready, I would be dead right now. I was never ready to give up the drugs completely. It was a slow process. It's something God did over a period of time.
When we come back, we're going to speak with our next guest, Mr. Robert Williams. He went from being a rock and roll band musician to an addict on the bench, homeless, to a counselor, and now he's just an all-around wonderful husband. We'll talk about him and more when your sweet Danny J returns.
I'm Beth Healy.
And I'm Charles Howard.
Every day we bring you the best of community events and news from the Southern Crescent.
Weekdays at 1 o'clock and 7 o'clock.
Watch us on SCB TV News Channel 182.
And welcome back, be sure that you're liking us on Facebook. And if you hear something that you like from the show, be sure to tweet it, Facebook post it, Instagram, do whatever you need to do. But just get the word out there that addiction doesn't discriminate, but neither does recovery. Right now, I am sitting here with our next guest, Mr. Robert Williams. I absolutely love you. He is a dear family friend of ours. And I can't help but call you Mr. Bob.
That's fine.
Mr. Bob, you have an awesome and an amazing story and testimony to share, as well as like Lindsay did. What do you do now? Let's tell me about your life now. Let's start now.
Well, I'm recently married, 3 years.
She said 4.
4 years of outstanding, just a wonderful wife, and I'm retired actually, but my wife and I have a program that she started. It's kind of involves real estate and actually more instructions on how to buy and sell homes and that kind of thing. So
it's been years since you began recovery.
Yeah.
Tell us what your life was like before you became addicted to drugs and alcohol.
Well, I worked primarily for the government, Department of Justice, Federal Trade Commission, a brief stint at the post office, very brief, and St. Elizabeth Hospital in Washington, D.C. So.
You're a young man. You must have started when you were like 6 months old.
Well, actually, I went in the military at 17, and spent 3 years in the military, and no drinking, straight, just gung-ho military. And then when I came out, I got married shortly thereafter, and I began drinking and drug use.
Now somebody's going to say you got married and you began drinking. They're going to tie them two together.
It wasn't. You know, I had a good wife. She was Christian, just a good lady. But it was the people that I began to hang around. I went from being married to living on my own, nice apartments, thick carpet. Well, maybe that thick, and just a real good life. Got involved with a lot of people who were doing cocaine back then, no crack, just cocaine and a lot of drinking. So I loved that lifestyle. I loved just being around people, and I had that desire to be needed, I guess is what.
Well, we're going to talk about, when we come back, we're going to talk about your life. Once you enter that lifestyle, we're going to talk about your life and your decline, and then your rise again, when your sweet Danny J returns. And welcome back. Thank you so much for sticking with your sweet Danny J. Again, please be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We're all over the web. I'm telling you, there's no way that we can't be family and link up and connect. I'm sitting here with Mr. affectionately called Mr. Bob. He is in recovery from a long stint of addiction, but in an even longer stint of recovery. Mr. Bob, now when we took a break, you were telling us about how you were entering into the life of a musician and how you had thick carpet. And for those young people, thick carpet is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. Carpet and cushion. It means a lot. It means a lot. Try to fall on some thin carpet, I'm telling you. Now tell us what your life was like. Well, let's go forward a few years. And when you were heavily doing drugs and alcohol, what was your life like?
That was a bad time. I remember after my wife divorced me, well, actually just kind of put me out, so to speak. I remember going to my mother's and asking her if I could just spend a little time there just to get myself together, and then I was going to move on. And of course, being an addict, by the way, I had stopped using cocaine by that time. I was just drinking. And I used to say, one of my favorite sayings was, drink gin because it ain't no sin. But it certainly was a sin for me. But so I was staying there, and one day, for some reason, I decided to just kind of sneak some alcohol in, and I was happy about something. I think I might have had a part-time job at that time. But so I snuck the alcohol in, and just taking a little nip here, there, and everywhere. And my mother called me to come downstairs. I guess she was cooking something, wanted me to kind of taste it. And when I came down the stairs, I missed one of the steps. Didn't fall down, but missed one of the steps. And my mother shot out of the kitchen like a shot. And she said, "You've been drinking." And I said, "No, ma'am, Mom, I haven't been drinking." Now, I was 32 years old at that time. And she said, "Well, if you haven't been drinking, you look like you've been drinking." And so she decided to go in, get a green shopping bag, throw all of my belongings at that time. Wow. I think I had maybe a half a suit, maybe a couple pair of socks and a pair of shoes. She threw all that stuff in and told me I had to leave.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, mothers were real back in the day.
Yeah.
Parents were real. They were allowed to do what they needed to do.
From that point on, I was eating out of McDonald's dumpsters. I was, people, as they stood at the bus stop, because I would go to the bus stops and panhandle, and people would pluck away cigarettes because I was smoking at that time, and I would pick up the lighted cigarette after they would get on the bus. So it was not a good time for me. And of course, I was in and out of detox, I was sleeping, by this time I was sleeping on a park bench there at 7th and Massachusetts Avenue. This one Sunday, I was asleep, and I have to say, that's the first time I heard from the Lord. And he woke me up. It was about 9 o'clock on this Sunday morning, and there was a kind of heavy-set lady and 2 little girls and a little boy, and I knew they were on their way to church. And that reminded me, really brought tears to my eyes, because that reminded me of my mother dragging me and my 2 sisters off to church. She made sure we went to church every Sunday. And I woke up, got myself together, cleared my eyes out, and I decided right then, because this voice said, "I didn't put you here to die like this." And I decided then to go to detox. Now, detox was about 2 blocks up, but I was so weak. I know it was the Lord, because otherwise I wouldn't have made it. And when I got to detox, the nurse, who by the way was named Williams, that was a nasty lady. But at any rate,
I can't.
she wouldn't. She said, "Don't let him in because he always fights." Because I would, was in and out of these, and I'd get in a fight. Never won one of those fights, but I would get in fights. And she said, "Don't let him in because he always wants to fight." And so I'm standing there and I'm thinking, this is my last shot. If I don't go in here now, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so a guy came to the window and he looked out. He said, "Is your name Williams?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Did you used to go to Randall Junior High School?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said to the nurse, he said, "I'll take responsibility for it, let him in." And so that was my last drink. That was in 1968. No more drug use. I stayed in treatment. I left detox, went to a treatment program in Virginia, a converted jail down there, and I stayed there for a year, and then I went into a halfway house situation. And I stayed there for a year. This is the best life that I could ever ask for, actually. Now, if you have any additional questions
I
about
don't. Thank you so much for sharing. We'll have a performance by Ms. CaTonja Alexander when your sweet Danny J returns.
I'm Harry Douglas, wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons, number 83, and you're watching SCB TV.
And we're back. Our next guest needs absolutely no introduction, but I will introduce her because that's what I'm here for. Her name is CaTonja Alexander. She has been singing since she was a baby, ever since I've known her. And I've known her since she's been a baby. And so she has blessed everywhere she's went, and I'm sure she's about to bless us right now. Coming and performing, LaShawn Pace Rhodes. I don't think she's a Rhodes anymore, but LaShawn Pace, My Times. Please welcome CaTonja Alexander.
If I were in control of my life, I would work things out so much differently. There would be no hurt, no pain, no disappointment. Of these things, my life would be scot-free. But that just goes to show how little I know about leading and controlling my life. For you see, all these things work together just to make the best of me. If I were in control of my life, I would work things out so much differently. There would be no hurt, no pain, no disappointments. For all these things, my life would be scot-free. But that You see, if I were in control of my life, I would work things out differently. My times, all of the good and all of the bad, my times, all of my hurt and all of my pain, my times are in His hand.
And there is no combination of words I could say, but I will still tell you one thing: we're better together.
That was so amazing, absolutely amazing. I want to take this opportunity to thank CaTonja Alexander, thank Gene Prime, and that's not his name, but I call him Mr. Prime Man. I want to thank Lindsay Rogers and Bob Williams, our guests for today, and Shining Light Recovery Home for Women, and just everyone that has gone forward to help us put this awesome and amazing show. My neck candy, Park Lane, everyone that has come to make this as wonderful of a show as it is. And today's show was a little different. It was a little bit more intimate. It was about the recovery. Everyone remembers when you're going down. No one remembers what it took and how they saw you going down. They remember what you were like there. And then they remember little bits and pieces of your life, of what it's like when you're recovering and when you're on your way up. But they're always reminded for some reason about what happens when you're down. And we wanted to take this opportunity to talk about life. You can be a productive member of society. Addiction does not discriminate, but neither does recovery. No one is exempt. And addiction is something that has a hold on you. It's far greater than anybody pulling on your coattail. And sometimes as you try to soar as Superman, addiction latches on to your cape. It's hard to soar high with something grabbing your cape tails. So I'm your sweet Danny J today, telling you that you can recover. Don't stay where you are. Know that it's one day at a time, and you will always be in recovery. It's not enough to say the words. You also have to do the action behind it. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, but just be there with us as we are for you. I am your sweet Danny J, wishing you a sweet day.